One of the more sophisticated aspects of the mitzvahs of the Torah is that the Torah often allows or even commands behavior, but that in essence and in the background, the Torah does not approve of it. We find that example, for instance, by Yifas Toar, that in battle the Jewish soldier sees a non-Jewish woman, and he wants her, and he lives with her, and the Torah provides a whole ritual and a whole set of circumstances. But in effect, the Torah tells him it's not a good idea. And so, therefore, the Talmud says, Lo dibra Torah ela keneged yetzer hara. The Torah, so to speak, makes allowances for human frailties. But the wise human being would be cognizant enough to avoid it. It's like, we'll see in a minute, you don't tell someone who is prone to alcoholism that he should take a job in a bar. So even though there's no issur, right? But it's not a smart thing to do. So in this week's parsha of Naso, we have the parsha of nazir. The Torah describes a nazir. So a nazir is someone who takes upon himself vows. Two types of nazir. There's the regular nazir who is only bound to those vows for 30 days. And then there's a nazir olam. There's someone who was a nazir one's entire life, as we find in Tanakh, Shimshon and Shmuel, and that they were nazirim. And the Torah prohibits the nazir from drinking wine, from becoming impure. There's a whole set of restrictions on the nazir. So in the Talmud, there is a great deal of criticism against people who become nazirim. In the words of the Talmud, lo dayach ma she'osra Torah, it's not enough, all of the lavin that we have in the Torah under a regular circumstance, and you you're frumer than that. Because we all know that not always is more beneficial. And that's true in piety as well. And therefore, who asked you to become a nazir? On the other hand, the Gemara says, Rashi quotes it here, Haroeh sota b'kilkula, because the parsha of Sota, of the woman who was unfaithful, there's a juxtaposition in the Torah between it and the parsha of Nazir. So, Haroeh sota b'kilkula, yazir atzo min hayayin. Person that lives in a society where one can see sota b'kilkula, so to speak, on a regular basis, so he has to take extraordinary defensive measures. It's not enough. So you have here these, so to speak, two opposite views of the matter. One views the matter as being a wonderful thing, an act of piety, an act of prevention against temptation. And the other view is that you should never have done it, and that the Torah is not happy with people who accept upon themselves extra burdens and think that that's what God wants them to do. So the Gemara teaches us, for instance, that when Shimon HaTzadik was the Kohen Gadol, at the early stages of the Second Temple. So he declared that he never participated in the ritual of the sacrifice of purification of a nazir. He wouldn't, he sent other Kohanim, he wouldn't do it because he disapproved of it. And he said, he always doubted the motive of the nazir. He doubted that it was 100% l'shem shamayim. Because there's a lot of one-upsmanship in us that allows us to be pious. I'm more pious than you, so I'm better. And you see how observant and pious I am. And because the Navi says, Okol valev mi yedoenu, the human heart, the human psychology is so perverse, no one knows it. So you don't know yourself why you did it. So you may think that you have the highest of motives and the best of intentions, and in reality, your motives were hubris and arrogance and show-offness, etc., etc. So therefore, Shimon HaTzadik wouldn't participate. He was the Kohen Gadol. Somebody brought the korban to be purified from a nazir. Wonderful. So he sent out. It had to be done in the temple, so somebody had to do it. But because it would have indicated that somehow he approved of the whole thing, and he wanted to make clear that he disapproved, and that he didn't want people to become nazir. However, the Gemara says he himself made one exception. That there was a nazir that once came, and he questioned him, why did he become a nazir? And he said that he saw his reflection in a pool of water, and he admired how handsome he was. And therefore he felt that in order to counteract that, he had to accept upon himself the vows of Naziris. So Shimon HaTzadik said that he accepted. That Nazir is legitimate, because he did it for really a legitimate purpose. But he said, but most Nazirim, he really looked at them askance. He didn't feel that they were justified in that. So there's a tendency upon people, within people. So just there's a tendency to violate commandments, God forbid, that one becomes a prisoner, so to speak, of one's desires and of society and of other pressures. There's also a tendency to go to the other extreme. And that leads to Nazirus. And Nazirus often leads to problems. So we find the classic cases in the Tanakh. Shimshon, for instance, who's a Nazir Olam. The prophet the Malach told his mother that he should be a Nazir from birth, and that he will save the Jewish people. But he had at best a checkered career, because of the fact that the mere fact that one doesn't take a haircut doesn't save one from other temptations and other problems in life. And before Shim discussed that in Nazirus, the problem was that it was always an outward manifestation of piety. It wasn't an inward. You let your hair grow. You didn't go to places that you could become impure. You set yourself away from society. It really is almost the idea of becoming a hermit. The Torah is not for that. The Torah doesn't approve of that kind of behavior, certainly not for the masses of Israel. Though there can be exceptional cases, there'll be exceptional people that will accept. But generally speaking, so you have here this conflict, so to speak, within the Torah itself, within our tradition, as to how to view the things. And that gave rise, in later generations, at the end of the Second Temple times, to a group of people who call themselves the Isim, or the Essenes, who all were Nazirim, and who remained celibate, and they lived in caves in the Judean desert. That's the people of the Dead Sea Scrolls, probably. And it is from that group that early Christianity developed. Because if you take a look at Christianity, it became Judaism compounded in many, many respects. In many respects it was paganism, but in many respects it was Judaism, but it was too much. You're still supposed to love everybody. And, and you're supposed to die for someone's sins, and all of these ideas are taken from Jewish ideas that are taken out of context and taken to an extreme. And when that happens, so then the opposite of what was intended occurs. So in Christianity, for instance, you had people in monasteries and in nunneries and convents and people that were separated from life. And you see the problems that the church has today from the fact that it's too frum, it's too much. It's against human nature. So in Lithuania, the Jews used to say, my Rebbe always repeated it, they would ask him, Rebbe, is he frum? And he would say, frum is a galach. A priest is frum. A monk is frum. We don't have frum. We have the Torah, right? So the Torah is built upon a broad view of life, upon natural life, upon being human. So therefore, this was always a problem of extremes. And basically, we can say a general rule that the Torah is against extremes, and that's the Rambam's famous idea of the Shvil HaZahav, the golden mean, the golden path, the middle of the road. That a person should always attempt, not to be too far on one side or too far on the other side. That's part of the difference that exists in our world today. There are movements within the Jewish world that are just too far to one side or the other. And because of that, therefore, to a great extent, we're hampered because of the fact that we are not, so to speak, on the golden path. We've taken a detour somewhere else. And this was a social issue in the 19th century. It was part of the argument regarding Musar, part of the argument regarding Hasidus. It's today part of the argument that we have. Today it's politicized, but it's still part of the argument. But the Torah wants us to be careful. So therefore, it's true, Aroa Sota Biklu Kula Yazir Atzro Min Hayayin, that's certainly true. But nevertheless, we should remember, Dayach, Masha Asra Torah, you don't have to add on it either. And how and when and what the circumstances are, those are the challenges of life that apply to each and every one of us. Rabbi Chananya ben Akashia Omer Ratza Kadosh Baruch Hu L'Zakash Yisrael V'vichach Hir B'lahem Torah Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chafetz L'man Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir.